All right, welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today for this career panel and Ask Me Anything as part of the TIDES Converging Approaches to Sustainable Resilience event hosted by George Mason University's Center for Resilient and Sustainable Communities, also known as C-RASC. What we do at C-RASC, just to introduce our center, is we support communities in addressing critical real-world problems through convergent research and approaches that build resilience. So if you're interested in learning more or joining our mailing list, you can visit our website, which is shown on this slide here, c-rasc.gmu.edu. I am Dr. Hannah Torres. I am the Assistant Director for Research Operations with C-RASC, and my own background is in geography and environmental science and policy. During this session, we're fortunate to be joined by Dr. Marysel Pagan Santana, Senior Program Manager at the Migrant Clinicians Network, joining us from San Juan, Puerto Rico. We also have, well, we may have Rabia Tariq joining us if she's able to join in the call. She's Program Officer for Emergencies and Disaster Risk Reduction at the Caritas Pakistan National Secretariat. We also have Shannon Evans, an Emergency and Risk Coordinator with Allegheny County's Department of Human Services, and Dr. Joseph Kerski, Education Manager at Esri, and also an instructor at the University of Denver. So the way that we have this panel structured is that during the first 45 minutes or so, the panelists will introduce themselves and their institutions, along with maybe a bit of career advice or tips. And then during the following 45 minutes, we'll have plenty of time for questions or discussion with each other, at the very least, about career skills related to sustainable resilience. And there's no need to wait until the end to ask questions. Feel free to type any questions you have in the chat. And I would say that also applies for the panelists if you have questions for each other. Just go ahead and type those in, and we can also have some good discussion afterwards. So without further ado, let's get started with Dr. Pagan, if that's okay with you.
Sure. I'll go ahead and share my slides if that's okay with you guys.
Oh, sure.
So hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Marysel Pagan Santana. I'm Senior Program Manager in San Juan, Puerto Rico from Migrant Clinicians Networks. Migrant Clinicians Network is a nonprofit organization. We work, even though our name says migrant, we don't only work with migrant populations. We work with the overarching goal to have health justice achieved to all the vulnerable population, especially the mobile ones. And we are currently, my role is to lead all the climate-related programs and approaches that we have, especially in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and all the island of Puerto Rico. And we also have several programs related to health continuity of migrant population, occupational health and safety. But recently, we are moving towards to having climate crisis as one of the factors that affects all the stuff related to health and occupational health. So that's kind of our focus. We usually work with community health centers. So all of our programs have some kind of community health approach. So when we're talking about something that's sustainable, building resilience through communities, we do a bottom-up approach rather than just going there and give people the instructions or the way of doing stuff. We usually want to get to know the community and build trust with them and get them to expand their networks, resources, and work from there with the overarching goal of having a better health and well-being, as well as to be healthy and be prepared when disasters come. As you know, Puerto Rico is in a vulnerable situation just because of our location. We are at risk of having a hurricane every year. We have some earthquakes that hit us recently. And we also have some economic and social determinants that kind of put us in a situation that we need to have this kind of conversation, and ongoing conversation towards resilience. But our role as MCN is to bring that from the communities to the government. So that's basically a really big picture of what we do. So basically, I have kind of an unconventional background, academic background, to ended up working as an MCN manager. I did my bachelor degrees in natural science and at the University of Puerto Rico in San Juan. It is an interdisciplinary program, which led me to pick social sciences as elective courses. So my first, I guess my first point to people who are trying to get a diverse background, and when you're working in things like resilience and emergency preparedness and disaster, you need to get to know social factors affecting that kind of issues for communities. So getting your background in social sciences is really important, not to get only your raw natural science courses. So that was a big factor for me moving towards public health. Then I moved to industrial hygiene program, and I got there by taking an elective course in disaster management when I was on my undergraduate degree. So I moved to the industrial hygiene, and I started working in focused extracurricular activities. And what I mean is that I was part of the student associations that were really involved into the topic of occupational health and safety and disaster management. I did some research and other related job, and I got into this internship, which was my open door to the private sector after graduating from my master's degrees. I did plan to have my doctoral degree right away. I did not stop, but I also had the privilege to work while I was doing my doctoral degree, and I maintained my industrial hygiene practice active. So that led me to have kind of a different approach. It was not only a public health graduate student, but also somebody who had a technical approach to problems using my industrial hygiene background degree. While I was in my doctoral degree, I also took time to get involved into policy and get to know how things were built up. The opportunity to do so, in my case, arrived as a student representative at the University of Puerto Rico. So my knowledge in how public policy works comes from how academic policy works in the institution, since it's a public institution. So you get to know a lot of the networking processes, how the government relationship with the university works out. And it shows you a lot of how to move through all those lines when you're working public policy in other topics. So that was a lot of that came out, and I took with that experience is how to move in the public policy approach, and which offices are related to what, and how to talk with people who are usually in charge of writing and moving forward this policy, even if it's health related or not. So I did want to talk about and give the kind of the story of how I got my job, because I think it's a really curious time. My current boss was the chair of a section for the APHA, American Public Health Association, Occupational Health and Safety section. So I always under my, while I was a student, I always try to look forward to those conferences and try to see if I can get money either for a scholarship or if the university did some kind of sponsorship to go there. I know as a student, it's not easy to pay for this stuff. So I always plan ahead. I was always thinking in the next conference, not the current one, because we always want to do the immediate stuff. Like you figure out there is a scholarship every year, but if you plan ahead, you kind of figure out and has your way, the best possibility to actually get that scholarship and talk to the right people and even get some funding from your department. It's always a possibility to find something there, even make out a poster, and you have the time to it. So I did plan ahead. I got a scholarship, and the person who gave it to me is my current boss. We didn't know each other at the moment, and I guess the specific turning point for me was to I went to an open business meeting. This is where all the committees get together. They usually open for everybody, and students don't usually go there. They go to the expo, they go to social hours, they move to another kind of networking. So I went to a open business committee meeting, and I did a really uncomfortable question. Like I not only went, but I also participated. So they were presenting something, and I did ask how that applied to Puerto Rico. And somebody took note, which is now my boss, and she came all the way down, offered me an internship with them. And 2 years later, I ended up working as a program manager. So going to those open meetings, getting to know the people who are usually upfront and really involved in your area of academic development, and also participate. Just don't just go there and sit. Ask the questions, even if it's something like you don't understand or you want to know, because usually the people who had the network, like the stronger network and the opportunities for you, are sitting around you in those kind of conference. So that was my experience. I did have an internship with NCM before I actually went to work, and I keep in touch with my supervisor towards the ending of my career as a doctoral degree student. And I ended up doing some work and establishing an office in Puerto Rico with them. I think that's about it.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I thought you gave some really great advice, and I loved hearing your story because it resonates a lot with me. Like going to conferences and just making sure that people see you. It doesn't take a lot to stand out when you go to a conference, or even just send an email to somebody when you realize there really aren't that many people who do that. It seems like such an easy thing, and you might assume, oh, you know, they won't notice me, but it does, it stands out. So I love that advice. We do have Rabia with us now, but if it's fine, Shannon, would you mind introducing yourself next, and then we'll go on to Rabia after that?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Evans, and I am currently the Emergency Risk Coordinator for Allegheny County Department of Human Services, and that is located in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. And I am also a current grad student studying sustainability, so I'll be able to talk about those two perspectives in a moment. But what started my path on the emergency management process was in 2012, I was able to go on a few disaster response initiatives while I was in high school, and that opened my eyes to the world of emergency management. Soon after choosing that I wanted to study emergency management, I was able to get accepted to the University of Akron, who has a specific bachelor's in emergency management and homeland security field. And they have sub-concentrations as well, which either relate to criminal justice, medicine, whatever your focus may be. You're able to also merge your own or do the full 4 years in emergency management and homeland security. As a student, very similar to what some of our other panelists have already mentioned, is that I was a student member and very active with our conferences. And as a student, I was a part of the International Association of Emergency Management, where I was able to attend many of the student conferences as a student member, as well as the full conferences that they offered. And the conferences really opened my eyes to the world of networking, those subtle differences that were just mentioned about how you can stand out, but also I was able to find my niche in different categories. And one of the main proponents I want to emphasize is that when I would attend a conference and see something that maybe could benefit the conference, but wasn't being a filled capacity at that time, such as maybe a basket raffle for a state conference or a form that might be available to be able to better assist individuals, or just even notations on a name tag, I was able to push those ideas and be able to make way for myself to be known by the conference coordinators and the other individuals by being able to take on a specific project to meet an unmet need. And that networking itself showed to be very beneficial throughout my career. So after I did graduate from my bachelor's degree, I started my first job in actual emergency management in 2017, and that was with Allegheny County, where I am right now with my position. And what led me to be able to get that job was my previous experience in the county with 2 different internships, one being with the emergency management for the county, and the other being with the American Red Cross. But my previous job experience as well really attracted the human service world, because not only did I have an emergency management or homeland security mindset and education, but I also came with retail experience, and I was a seamstress for many years. I also had childcare experience working as a teacher. So I was able to see human needs in a different capacity than many other applicants were. And I also was a very avid volunteer. So I would volunteer in different hospital settings to be able to see how individuals were assisted in a trauma center or in an emergency room. I did a lot of disaster response volunteering and a lot of experience just assisting general vulnerable populations themselves, whether that be with a food bank or with centers that served single parents in high school or college who could take their kids there for daycare and additional services. I had been involved in those for years prior, and being able to incorporate that human element into the layers of safety was essential. For that first job, I was very nervous upon accepting the position, only because my position was newly created and it was tying together a lot of different parts across the entire department. Because of this, I wasn't able to necessarily work with a strict safety team, but I was able to work with human response oriented partners, and then outside of our agency, be able to work with the service partners who represented the emergency management community or disaster response organizations. All of those connections as we move forward really helped to pave a way as to how I was able to connect the human elements of a disaster to emergency management. And during that process, I then gained the understanding that I did want to go back and be able to start attending grad school, which I am still currently a student. And I chose Chatham University for the Sustainability Master's Program. Part of my research and my program currently is how to connect the Sustainable Development Goals to emergency preparedness phases themselves. Everything from mitigation going through to recovery, and how we can transition our current framework of disaster response to looking at it from the lens of Sustainable Development Goals to be able to create a more resilient world post-disaster and pre-disaster. So right now I'm early on in my research, being able to just figure out what the baseline is of this acceptance across the emergency management community, and we'll be continuing that research on. For my current position though, you did not need to have a master's degree. You do not need a specific master's degree in many emergency management jobs, as I came to realize, unless you want to get more into the academia world. And that is slowly transitioning from the trends that I am seeing due to the fact that more emergency management degrees are being offered, and the transition of individuals in the field from getting the position due to possibly retiring from a more active response style mentality to getting the position because you have an academia background is slowly happening. And so that trend and that curve will predict very interesting outcomes, I believe, over time, to be able to see the perception of emergency management and how different approaches may be handled. One of the notes that I want to make is that I currently in my role don't necessarily do hiring for full-time positions, but I do assist with many interns and being able to mentor those students along the way and help them approach the emergency management or disaster-related field in whatever aspect they find most beneficial for their careers. In that process, I do find it extremely helpful that I am currently a student, because I'm able to understand the pros and cons of doing such. I am currently able to understand the uptick of student debt and taking on that realm and making those decisions as you approach certain fields and certain outcomes, and how that may impact the decision that you make about what current job you may want. And being able to navigate that world, I think I'm able to help students talk through those options, because as we know, there is no single outcome to anything and single path that you can take, but being able to weigh the options and navigate all of the possibilities that best suit your lifestyle at that point in time, especially as we're seeing now in this world of COVID, what decisions you make may have more lasting outcomes due to the current implications. I think one of the most important traits that an individual can take away whenever they are looking at their career field or how to get involved in the emergency management world or the sustainability world is, how do you keep your interest alive? And if you look at any millennial research, you may see that millennials really want to take role and be a part of a community where they can have the act of hope as their emphasis and be able to constantly support a cause that they believe in. And prior to actually reading that research, I didn't think that anyone else thought that except for me, and was shocked to learn that that is majority of my demographic currently. But being able to assist the connection between the two worlds is substantial within sustainability development, emergency management, disaster management, any sort of international aid type lens, and being able to keep the values at hand to be able to move forward in the transition process when identifying different career goals, but also looking for the gaps and trying to fill those, because we do find many possibilities for research, possibilities for involvement or career fields, but we may see that it doesn't necessarily transition to the best outcome. And being able to close those gaps, sometimes I find the most inspiration. So I do always encourage individuals to step outside the comfort zone, the most popular zone, or the most available area, and think a little bit outside the box to figure out how we can close those gaps in the loops to be able to transition smoothly. The networking is essential, conference involvement, as I mentioned, but as you look for these gaps and trying to fill your own personal interests and being able to develop and create your passion as you move forward in your career field, I think even looking for the simplest volunteer activity that may somewhat relate to that world could be night and day based on how you need to move forward in your life. And my most important experiences and the most important drivers that have led me to emergency management were the simple moments that I signed up to be a volunteer. And I heard about a field called emergency management while in a car to do tornado relief when I was in high school. And those simple moments really are big takeaways for me because they put me on this new trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, I'm hearing so much of your story that really resonates with me. Did you say you were a teacher at one point?
I did work in many childcare settings. I've worked in 2 in Pittsburgh and 2 in Akron when I was a student. And
I was a fourth grade. I was a fourth grade teacher when I started my career as well, which is funny that we're both in the positions that we are now. But
absolutely.
Yeah, that's great advice though. Just having practical work experience in any field is really something that's valuable when you're looking at careers. And I'm also really interested in your research and look forward to discussing that more when we get to the Q&A, thinking about the sustainable development goals and their roles in disaster management scenarios. So thank you so much, Shannon. Next, if we can, Rabia, would you be willing to introduce yourself and your organization? And I can share my screen with your slides if that works. However you'd like to do it.
Well, thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. And I hope you can listen me. Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I am Rabia Tariq, working as a program officer in DRR. It's Disaster Risk Reduction and Emergencies Department. I'm from Pakistan and working with Caritas Pakistan. It's an international organization working for the marginalized communities in remote areas of Caritas Pakistan. And well, it's an expression of concern of Catholics of Pakistan for justice, peace, and development. It operates on the mandate of Bishops' Conference of Pakistan, which are the board governors of Caritas Pakistan. It's an independent organization without all the involvement of political parties and other groups as well. Well, its vision of organization is the values of justice, peace, equality, and solidarity, and to protect the humanity as well. Well, if I'll talk about my career, it's Caritas Pakistan offers 1 month course known as NCDC. It's National Community Development Course every year, and I was the participant of this training. And then they have selected 3 best participants for the internship. Further, I have been selected as an associate in DRR and emergencies, and worked with the team in 1 million tree plantation campaign as well. After completion of my human resource management, I was promoted as a human resource officer and served the organization more than 2 years. And after that, keeping in view the need of the organization, I was assigned as program officer in DRR and emergencies. DRR is disaster risk reduction. It's for the reduction of the disasters, either it's man-made or either it's the natural disasters. As the whole world was suffering with COVID pandemic, we also suffering from COVID, as well as the twin emergency of floods 2020 in Pakistan. And now I'm working with the same organization for the development of the documents, the project proposals, the situation reports, the trips, and program reports, and many other tasks. Well, the selection of this organization was only NCDC, the National Community Development Course, and the environment of this organization brought me here. Joining Caritas was a good experience because of the Christian organization, which is helping the communities, the neglected ones, the needy ones, and it was opportunity for me to serve the community through this organization. And particularly my advice for the new ones to find out your passion first. What's your passion, and then work on it. Not on the single one. You must work more than 2 options. And as you know, the current trends are climate change and cash programming in emergencies, as well as the volunteer management, and artificial intelligence is mostly used in every department. And the trends are changing to the climatic conditions. As climate change is all over the world, it's changing the trends. And I'll suggest everyone that understand the working environment. For this purpose, they must spend more than 2 weeks in the same organization to understand the current trends, the working environment, and the job trends as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us today. And I think that you give some great advice as well. Something that I love from your presentation that I've been hearing as what seems to be a trend among our first 3 panelists is the importance in your careers of thinking about local community problem solving in the work that you do. So I would encourage our attendees to think about if you have questions related to that. I think that that would be wonderful. But thank you so much, Rabia. With that, Dr. Kerski, if you'd like to go ahead and share your screen, we'd love to hear about your work as well.
Oh, well, many thanks, Dr. Torres. It's great to be with you all. Wow, I've got lots of questions, and I've been very inspired by the prior 3 presentations, so thank you for sharing. Hopefully you're seeing this screen here where I've got my contact information. I have, like you all, a deep passion for empowering people with geographic ways of thinking at all ages and in all disciplines, and using geospatial technology to understand our world and then plan for and build a more resilient, more healthy, more happy more sustainable communities and world for the future. That's ultimately what drives me forward. And just a tiny bit about me. I love how Shannon mentioned that there are multiple pathways. And in my own journey, I've started out in mostly federal agencies. So served as a geographer for NOAA, U.S. Census Bureau, U.S. Geological Survey. Now I'm at Esri, as Dr. Torres mentioned earlier, Environmental Systems Research Institute. More about that in a moment. It's a private mapping GIS company, which you probably are familiar with. But like many of you, I love working with students and faculty. So I teach at different universities. Right now, I'm teaching at a couple of ones that are listed here. I've also been in nonprofits, so president of the National Council for Geographic Education. So my own research area is actually teaching and learning with geospatial technologies and the geographic framework. So it's much in the education sphere of things. But I'm really happy to be with all of you today. The thing that I wanted to focus on in terms of my current main role in two ways, just to kind of give you a flavor for what it is, but also for people watching this now and then people watching this later, to know that the team that I'm on, which is at Esri, the 3 goals of Esri are right at the bottom of this pull down: in education, sustainability, and science. So that is exactly what has been guiding us for 51 years now. And this page here about education, this is my team's main landing page. The idea of having a team like this is that we are here to support faculty, deans, students, provosts, teachers from primary, secondary, university, technical college, tribal college, libraries, museums, after-school clubs, wherever there's teaching and learning happening. We want to be there to support the use of powerful and easy to use web mapping tools to teach about the issues that you all are raising: climate and sustainable development and energy and water and emergency management and so on and so forth. So that's really the focus of our team. Now, everybody around the planet, pretty much with a web connection, has looked at this JHU coronavirus dashboard over the last 8 months or so. And so, unfortunately, it has become the most popular web mapping application that's ever existed. Kind of a neat message for your students, though, is if there is a nice message in here, and that is that a graduate student actually created this. Some of you may know this story with guidance from that student's professor, but it's a good message for, I think, all of us, that hey, while you're still a student, you can do amazing things. That these things are accessible, and that's my central message. So I created a story map. It's a multimedia map on an issue that I care about, and that is walkable communities. So in this story map, and there are over 1 million story maps out there now, you probably have seen many of them, you probably have created a few of them yourself. That's what I want to encourage you to still do. But in here, I talk about what is walkability. And then inside there, I've got a survey. This is in survey 1, 2, 3. It's just like Google Forms or SurveyMonkey, where you're dragging and dropping elements into a form. But the advantage here is that it becomes mappable. And my whole passion is, if we can map things, then we can understand things better and then make wiser decisions. That is really what drives me forward. So is it pedestrian friendly or unfriendly? Where is it? Do you have a photograph? And that sort of thing. So inside my story map then is my live feed from my survey, which is actually open to the public, and you can actually participate in my walkability survey. So if I click on one of these points that I or others have submitted, I can see the different places where people have submitted data to. So for example, in this place, as you saw me panning down to Australia, where was that, and is that walkable or not? And then at the bottom of this story map, I actually have something that's going to look pretty familiar. I have a dashboard. It's a dashboard just like that JHU coronavirus dashboard, only in my case, I don't have multiple sources coming in from World Health Organization and other agencies. I have the simple survey that I created feeding this dashboard. So the central message is, you have these tools at your fingertips to make a difference in your own community, to be a change agent, whether it's walkability or invasive species or water quality or dangerous intersections or graffiti, or whatever it is that you're passionate about. You've got these capabilities. And just to be totally transparent, I've got 421 points in my own survey. You can see these pie charts that I've got. Roughly a third of them are unfriendly and 2/3 are friendly. But the point is, this whole thing, the dashboard, the story map, it took me about an afternoon. Okay, so we're not talking weeks, months. It took me about an hour to create the survey, an hour to create the dashboard, an hour to create the story map, and an hour to make the map that drives the whole thing. So again, having this web GIS paradigm at our fingertips is incredibly powerful. Okay. One of the things I wanted to encourage you to do, speaking of story maps, you can have a standard resume or CV like this. You probably already have one. I've got one that looks roughly like this. But I want to also encourage you to make a story map of your CV. It's for several reasons. A, it keeps you in touch with web mapping tools. And B, you can put some geeky, nerdy pictures of yourself, like me lying on this map, in your story map. But the point is, you're keeping in touch with the web mapping tools, and then you're also put a map in there, a live interactive web map, where you can say, I studied over here, and I did this over here, and I did an internship, and then I went to GMU. And anyway, the point is, you're keeping in touch with the story maps tools. It's your own personal story, so there's no external notes that you need to consult. It's all pretty much in your head because it's your own story. And then the third thing, and I think maybe the most powerful, is it tells your future employer that, hey, this person knows a little bit about web GIS, and that's a good tool to have on your tool belt. So it serves multiple purposes, and I just highly encourage you to do that. Okay, in these remaining few moments, I wanted to just touch on what I believe are important forces, trends, and skills for you to, as you move forward in your career. These things that I've just mentioned in the prior several minutes, I think touch on these 5, what I call forces, acting to bring all of us in the geo-environmental community to a really key pivotal moment as we go forward. These tools, these perspectives are not going to go away. People are always going to be asking the where question and the whys of where question, which again really drives us forward. This whole idea, for example, of geo-awareness, where the general public is now talking about issues that formerly, you and I talked about only, and really not beyond our community. So climate and traffic and weather and natural hazards and health and all those issues that have a geographic component, people are actually aware of those more now than ever before. Citizen science, people participating in my walkability survey or your survey or other efforts around the world, the birding community, et cetera. And then storytelling with maps. I mean, this whole presentation that I'm giving right now is inside a story map. It's a story map is what it is. And so the other thing that I wanted to mention, kind of looking forward here in terms of the geotechnologies, this is my own list of the 5 trends in GIS or geospatial technologies, and you may disagree, but that's okay. We can have a chat about it. But the number 2 one that I'm going to talk about here especially is really, I think, key. And that is the CAD, BIM, Building Information Management community did a really great job of mapping interior spaces. And we in the GIS geography world did a pretty good job of mapping and understanding ecoregions and hydrology, watersheds and population change and so on and so forth. But why don't we work together? And that's what's starting to happen in these communities. It's a pretty exciting development. So we're starting to see tools like ArcGIS Urban and ArcGIS Indoors. We're getting a little bit of a merging, which makes sense because let's say there was a weather event on your campus at 2 p.m. on a Friday in a normal semester when everybody's there. Okay, we need to have the interior spaces mapped in 3D, and we need to have the external spaces mapped so we know where the emergency shelters
All right.
that drives you forward. That builds tenacity.
You froze for a moment. Sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, no worries. So I think that's a really key skill. You know, employers like Esri and others, we're looking for people coming into the organization where they're asking questions even that their employer is not asking them to ask. So even while you're a student, I just would encourage you, ask questions that even Dr. Torres is not asking you to grapple with. You know, you're thinking beyond what your professors are asking you to do. And then being able to work with data. I know this sounds super boring, but I have, oh, Joseph's data blog. Oh, I can't believe I'm so excited about it. No, it sounds super boring, but it's all about this spatial reserves data blog and book. They're all about, can you trust that data that you just pulled into your ArcGIS online map and it took you 60 seconds and you've got that map right there? Do you know where all the data sources came from? Can you trust them? How do you make a wise decision? So it's all about where to find data, how to find data, and how to be critical of it. You know, maps still have this sort of air of authenticity. People believe them. Well, as you know, maps have a lot of power, and so you need to be cautious about this wonderful web GIS world that we're in right now. So that might be a useful implication there, or a useful tool. But the ethical implications of what you're doing, I think, are so critical here. So some articles I've written about that might be useful. And then fourth, adaptability. One of my colleagues here on the panel today touched on this. You know, go outside your comfort zone. You know, so at a conference at AAG a few years ago, I went to a social work track. I learned a lot from their methods and that community. It was wonderful. It was completely outside of my sort of wheelhouse. I encourage you to do that. If you can't go out of your disciplinary comfort zone, even in a small way like that, go international. You know, have some international experiences. That'll jar your, sort of preconceived notion of how the world works. So I just encourage you to do that. It all builds you being a lifelong learner, I think. And then finally, have good communication skills. You know, have that elevator speech for your patrons, your CEO, your city manager, your professor, or whoever's going to ask you at some point, why do we need a position like yours in our organization? What skills do you bring? Okay, do you have that 1 minute speech, the 3 minute, the 5 minute, the 15-minute version down? And I believe that this decade is going to be exciting for us in geotechnologies, and you folks have a key role to play in that, and that we will emerge. We will solve these. We will grapple with these issues because we've got good people like yourselves. We've got some good tools. We've got some good data. We've got our networking. We're talking with each other, and the community is becoming more diverse and broader. We're getting the economists and the social scientists and the historians and people we've really never had in the geo-enviro sphere before. But we need those health officials, et cetera. So it's an exciting time, and I'm glad to be a part of it, and I'm glad to be a part of this panel. So thanks for having me, and I hope I didn't exceed my time badly.